Hey, this is Amanda from the Fundamental Home, and I am here today doing a collaboration that was started by Amanda at Freedom Acres. She actually started a collaboration and asked several of my friends if we would all take part on Modesty. And she asked several questions that we're all going to answer, and I could not tell you everybody who's in it. It's a lot of folks. I know Tangie's in it, I know Amanda's in it, I know there's Farmer Meemaw's in it, but if I keep naming, I'm gonna miss somebody. So go ahead and check in the description box below, and you will see all of the folks that are involved in this particular collaboration. Anyway, Amanda asked us some questions about modesty, and I'm going to read all of the questions to you at first because I'm actually going to go out of order when I answer them. So I figure if I tell you the questions in advance, you'll kind of know where I'm going with all of this. So the first question is, what does dressing modestly mean to you? Why is it important to me? Is modest dress a spiritual conviction for you? What made you decide that modest dress was important? And how do you teach modesty to your children? So, and the reason why I'm going out of order is because the third question is modest dress a spiritual conviction for you? And I don't think that I can talk about modesty at all without talking about my faith, because really that's kind of the impetus of what got me started, even considering modesty at all in my life. Growing up, I never gave it a second thought. My parents were actually really wonderful people, and pretty much we could dress however we wanted. I remember, wearing bikinis and pretty much anything, really. I mean, they were pretty open. I think I only got in trouble for wearing something that my mom felt was too tight one time. And I was kind of shocked that she said anything, because before that moment, I didn't have any clue that something could be too tight. She told me to take off a pair of jeans because she felt they were too tight. And I was like, really? It hadn't even occurred to me that they might be too tight. So, but that was the only time she ever said anything like that to me. So I didn't think about it at all ever growing up. It wasn't until I got older that it became something that I even noticed. And I think that it did kind of come in my mind a little bit as a teenager, because when I was a teenager, I was a fairly attractive teenager, and I did get some attention from men, and it made me uncomfortable. So even at the point that I really wasn't following the Lord, it was something that was on my mind that I needed to cover up a little more, because I knew that dressing a certain way attracted attention that I did not want. So that's kind of the background of me and my modesty story. But in terms of it being a spiritual conviction, I kind of knew that modesty was important. I grew up as a bus kid, if you know what that is. That means that I went to church on a bus with a bunch of other kids, but I didn't go with my parents. So it was something that was talked about in my Sunday school and my classes at church, but it wasn't something that really registered with me, because like I said, it wasn't something that was really talked about at home very often. Being that it was talked about in church, though, I did kind of have it in the back of my head, so when I got older, it was something that I did consider, especially when I started working in the workplace. The first couple of jobs that I had uniforms, but then once I started working at a professional position, I knew that I needed to dress in a way that was business appropriate. And I think that was, in my mind, more modest. That was kind of the connection that I made. So I had some idea in my head of where I would set a standard for modesty for me without even though I had been attending church growing up, I still wasn't really following the Lord. It was a growing process that didn't really happen until I was in my early 20s. But anyway, so when it comes to modesty, it is a spiritual conviction. But like I said, a lot of the standards that I had in my head for modesty were just kind of already there, built with just ideas that I had in my head. It does have a connection to my faith, but I never, until she assigned this for the collab, actually went and researched modesty at all, because frankly, I felt like I had a good understanding of it without actually going to the Bible and reading what the Bible has to say about the subject. But I went to the Bible. And I looked at my Strong's Concordance, and I looked for the word modesty, and I realized when I went looking for it that it actually only appears one time in the Bible, and that's in 1 Timothy 2:9. So I'm going to read you what it says and just tell you my thoughts about that. Okay, I'm actually going to start at verse 8 because it's kind of a sentence. So it says, I will therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. In like manner also, meaning in the same way that there's this expectation for men, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. Okay? Now, if you really pay attention there, it's saying that the women should adorn themselves modestly. You know, they don't have to fancy up and do all of this stuff with the braided hair and the gold and the pearls and be fancy. But instead, if you go to verse 10, women, which becometh women professing godliness with good works, meaning their adornment should, instead of their outside, be their good works and the things that are good about them on the inside. So while I think modesty in this one verse has a place, meaning that what's on you isn't the showpiece, what's the showpiece is what's in you, right? So modesty has a place, meaning that what's outside isn't the best thing about you. It's the least important thing about you. It's what's on the inside that's important. And I've repeated that twice now, but I know what I mean, and I'm just having trouble expressing it to you. What I mean to say is that a lot of people emphasize the outside without paying attention to what's going on the inside. And so while I will talk to you about dressing modestly, because that's what this collab is about, it's not as important as what's going on in the inside of a person. Okay? And I think that's necessary to say at the outset. Okay? That being said, that particular word modesty, I looked it up in the Greek because I'm that person. I'm that person that looks everything up in the original, right? And it's kosmios, which means orderly, decorous, and of good behavior, and it also does refer to your apparel. So it's still, even when it's talking about being dressed with modest apparel, it's still focusing on being orderly, being neat, and the focus is on your good behavior. So anyway, so that kind of brought me to the question was, what does dressing modestly mean to you? So I also decided to look up the word dress because I just wanted to know where that was in the Bible and what it said about that. Now, different than modesty, there was a lot the Bible had to say about the word dress. Dress is actually used for the very first time in the Bible in Genesis 2:15, because let me read that one to you. It says, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So the very first mention of the word dress is in regards to how man is supposed to dress the garden. And when you think of dressing a garden, it is making it beautiful, it's making it useful, it's all the wonderful things that you can do with a garden. A garden is so many things, and it's dressing it and keeping it, right? That was Adam's job. And it just surprised me that that was the first use of the word, and I, of course, being the person that always looks everything up, I looked that up in the Hebrew. Now, I have a special interest in Hebrew because our family studied Hebrew a few years ago, and it was just one of the absolutely most fruitful studies that we've ever done. The best thing that I love about Hebrew is not only do the individual words have meaning, but if you take apart each Hebrew word and just look at the individual Hebrew letters, each of the letters has a meaning that can relate something to you about the word itself. So the word dress there in that Genesis 2 verse is the word, and I'm not going to say this right probably, abad. And it's spelled this way in the Hebrew. It's ayin, which is one letter, then bait, and then dalet. Okay? And I said each letter has its own meaning. Here's how it is. Ayin means I, understand, or seen. Beit is tent, house, or family. And Dalet is door, gate, path, or way of life. So the interesting thing is, a lot of times if you put those letters together, you kind of get a whole different meaning out of the word, but it's related and connected. Anyway, so in that way, it's like seeing your house or your family's way of life when you dress something from that word, which I think, that's just a random side thing. I am not a scholar by any means, but I do like looking up the actual words and the meanings and the things behind it, because I think you can see so many different connections. But I really like that, because I think that's just it about dressing modestly, is that it's what you're putting on display so that others can see your way of life. Okay? And again, that goes back to that 2 Timothy verse where it's talking about your apparel. You should really be adorning yourself with good behavior, that your actual physical clothing isn't the most important thing on you. So that being said, the best way to do that is to dress in a way that is not necessarily drawing attention to yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be dressed nicely, that you shouldn't be clean and attractive. We had a friend one time that told us that they decided that they were going to humble themselves and always just wear crazy things all the time. Well, and he realized, it was a gentleman, he realized after doing that for a while that he was actually bringing a lot of attention to himself, and it was negative attention, and that was not what he was going for. So he had to actually take a step back and reevaluate how he was dressing and how that showed who he was to other people, which is exactly what we're talking about here. So a lot of times when people think of modesty, they think, particularly when they're talking about Christians, they think it's just about dresses and skirts, and it's not. It's straight up not. I have a video, I'm going to link it right here, where I talk about, it was a Q&A, so it's a long video, and it's toward the end where I answer the dresses and skirt questions. I have people ask me all the time why I wear dresses and skirts. I'm going to link it up here. That's not this video. That's absolutely not this video. Dressing modestly is not just about dresses and skirts. At least not for me. And I don't think it is for most Christian women. It may be how some Christian women choose to show themselves as modest, but that's not what being modest is, at least not how I see it in the Bible. So when I talk about what dressing modestly means to me, which is the first question, I'm telling you that modesty is, to me, about not making a show of my physical appearance so that it detracts from my inward self. Because the goal is that people will see me and who I am on the inside rather than what I wear on the outside. And I actually kind of like it about these videos that you only see me from like here up, that you have to be focused on my countenance and the things that I'm saying to you when you want to make a judgment call against me. Because the fact of the matter is that, when you do see someone, you do tend to make these judgment calls. So it's not even a question if you're just seeing this. But when you meet people in person, they're automatically going to look at what you're wearing and who you are and how you present yourself to the public. And so it's just something that, when it comes to modesty, I think the goal is, like I said, to not make a huge show with your clothing. Instead, make sure that people notice who you are and your good works rather than the outward. So that's, to me, what dressing modestly means. And why is that important? Well, like I just said, because it detracts from the inward. The goal is to clean the inside of the cup. Now, you still want the outside of the cup clean, but you don't want to neglect the inside of the cup. And I think a lot of times people focus way too much on what's on the outside rather than what's on the inside. And so when you dress modestly, when you keep your attire simple and not showy, And when I say not showy, I mean the obvious thing is not showing off parts of your body that, you know, would be showy. And you know, everybody's got to set that standard for themselves. I don't want to not talk about that in this video. I think it's important to say. I think it's definitely relevant. Modesty in terms of what part of your body you should or should not show, people are going to set a different standard for each family. Do you know what I mean? Each family has to have their own guidelines to where they're going to set the standard. And I have this sermon that I enjoy listening to, and it's called Why I Hate Rules. And they talk about, and if you're a Christian, you understand this, in the Bible it talks about men having short hair in the Bible. So this church had this Christian school, and they had a dress code. And in the dress code, they required that the young men had short hair. And so the question became, what does short mean? Well, they had to draw, you know, the Bible doesn't say what does short mean, but it's a Christian school, and they set the standard of short hair, so they had to draw the line somewhere. And they decided wherever they decided the short hairline was. And they said some people complained. Some people thought it was too long. Some people thought it was too short. And the reason why is because each individual family sets their own standard, right? But when you come together, you've got to draw the line somewhere, and someone's got to be the one to say this is the line, right? So I have not ever had to really deal with that in the last many years because we've been homeschooling. Although our homeschool group does have a dress code for their co-op, I think it's a very gracious one. It wouldn't impact our family because our family standards are different. But the point of that is that each family is going to set their own standard. Somebody's got to set a standard. The parents are going to be the ones to set the standard. And wherever they set it, that's where it is. Like I said, when I was growing up, my parents had very loose standards. And I'm not being critical of them. Not at all. That's what they decided for their home. For our home, we have very tight standards. Notice I did not say better or worse. Okay? I'm not going there. I think it's just a difference of opinion, and everybody's going to have to answer for their own families before the Lord someday. And I'm not going to talk about what your family chooses to do. For my family, we have certain standards as things that we want covered. Okay? And if you want specifics, I'm happy to give them to you. We want legs covered down to the knees. And we do that all the time, even with swimwear. Swimwear, legs are covered down at the knees without question. We want shoulders covered. We like sleeves. I think Brianna's had a dress or two that it had just the littlest bit of the shoulder covered, and it was really kind of at the line. You know what I'm saying? But Rick and I are going to take it on a case-by-case basis if we have to. So, but that's just how we feel for our children and our family. We don't, anything in between that doesn't get shown. I mean, that's all there is to it. And, you know, in terms of this area, you know, some people have very strict guidelines about how many fingers you can do from the breastbone or whatever. We don't go there. I mean, I think that we just can eyeball what we think looks appropriate and what doesn't. And, you know, it's never been a problem for us because I think our children growing up in a household where actual standards were kind of set for modesty, they just kind of know where it is. And like I said at the beginning, I grew up just kind of knowing where it was. There was no, you know, we didn't have rules on the wall, and we don't have rules on the wall here. It's just we buy the clothes and that's where it is. So anyway, those are the actual specifics. And it's important to me, in case I haven't said it, like I said, because I don't want it to detract from the self. I also don't want to draw attention away from the self. I don't want to draw negative attention to me, or in the case of my daughter, to her, or in the case of my boys, to them. I think the goal is that the attention is drawn to them based on who they are rather than what they look like. I don't know of any situation, I can't think of one, but if you can think of one, by all means comment, where it's good to draw attention to a person's physical appearance more than who they are as a person. Now, I have a daughter that I think is beautiful, But I have to be careful that I don't continually impress upon her her physical beauty more than her inner beauty. Because I need to make sure that she understands which one is more important. And so when it comes to modesty, that's the direction where we're going. That's why it's important. Because I can't think of a single time when the attention coming to the physical body is more important than the attention coming to the inner self. So obviously it's a spiritual conviction. That's question 3. I've talked about that in depth, I think. What made me decide that modest dress was important? I think having a daughter really brought it to my attention, because when I had a daughter, all of the things that I dealt with growing up came rushing to me. It was actually before I had her. It was as soon as I found out I was having a daughter. Every fear that I had for a daughter came rushing to me. And I really started thinking about the things that I did, because I knew that my behavior was going to impact how my daughter behaved. So that's why it's important to me. I mean, it's important to me for my own self, but it's really important to me for my daughter. Really important to me for her, because I really want her to grow up with not just other people not focusing on her outward and focusing on her inward, but her not focusing on her outward and focusing on her inward. And it's really helped me in terms of my own self and my own relationship with the Lord to have that kind of focus. So how do we teach modesty to our children? Well, we haven't done any very specific teaching. I mean, the Bible is present in our house regularly. And even though I homeschool, we've gone over different verses, we memorized portions of the Bible. I mean, Brianna and I did a whole Proverbs 31 woman thing, and we've just done a lot of different things. But I haven't specifically sat down and talked about them talk to them about modesty, because it's just something that I think that they've always known in our home. We've always had certain standards, we've always had certain expectations, and when anything ever came up, we talked about it. The bathing suit situation is the obvious one, because our children dress in bathing suits that are kind of different than others. I think my boys are relatively similar to other people. They always wear swim shirts with their shorts. But, I mean, that's not too different than a lot of other people. Brianna wears a swim shirt, which isn't a big deal, but she wears leggings and a swim skirt. And I think that for us, we don't have any different expectation from everyday clothing than we do for swim clothing. You know, the standard doesn't change depending on the activity. You know, it's always the same. So I think that was kind of helpful in that we had some consistency. So it really wasn't like it was a question. It was just, in this house, this is what we do. And so when Brianna got old enough, though, to notice what other girls were wearing, she would ask me, not why am I wearing something different, but Mom, why are they choosing to show so much? And I would just have to say, hey, you know, that's their family and that's what they decided, but this is what we're doing. And that was the end of it. It was never complicated, never any real discussion. I think as Brianna's gotten older, she's told me that she actually feels more comfortable in what she's told me she would not feel comfortable in what some other girls choose to wear. Certainly not a bikini. It's just she wouldn't feel comfortable that way. She feels very comfortable doing whatever she wants to do in her swimwear. So I'm glad that she feels that way. But it really hasn't been an issue in our household, so it hasn't been too many teaching times. I think it's just something that, kind of like when I was growing up, where children, you know, I just kind of understood what my parents expected and went with it. And I think our children just kind of understand what's expected and go with it. So anyway, that's a lot to cover for one video. And it's kind of a controversial topic, but that's how I feel about it. If you have any other questions, definitely put them in the comment section and I will try to answer those. I hope that I have tried to explain to you what modesty is to me and how we handle it in our family. So thank you for watching the Modesty collab. Make sure you check out the other videos in the description box, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.